Hello, I'm Callum and I am a studio miniatures painter, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make perhaps the most useful tool that you can have in your painting arsenal, and that's this thing here. It's a wet palette. So what is a wet palette? A wet palette is a piece of sponge and then a semi-permeable membrane on the top, which is your palette. Now, a semi-permeable membrane means that water from the sponge can pass through and gradually hydrate your paint, meaning that you can work with your paint for longer. So you can achieve really smooth blending, you can mix a custom colour together and keep working with it for longer. It's really useful for things like freehand, where you want to mix a very specific concentration of paint and water and then work with it to apply to your models. It's an incredibly useful tool. I cannot stress how much it leveled up my own painting as I was developing as a painter. Best bit as well is that you can make your own for free, or very, very small amounts of money. This is my homemade palette, and I've been working with this for the last 4 years. The first thing you're going to need is a resealable tub. For mine, I'm using one of the old Citadel Tuft boxes that they came in. You can see it's very worn on the front, but it still says Tuft somewhere on there. So you can see my tub is about 3 centimeters deep, which honestly is a pretty good depth. You don't want it to be too deep so that you're really having to angle your brush to get in down to touch the paint and move it around and manipulate it. You're going to need kitchen roll or paper towels, whatever you call it in your country. It is essentially the thicker, more absorbent towels that are going to be the base for our sponge. I'm going to try this time a copper penny. So apparently copper helps reduce the growth of mold, because obviously this is wet and damp and sealed. It's perfect conditions for mold. So to try and keep the palette going for longer, we're going to try and put a penny in this time and see if it keeps it working for longer. You're also going to need baking paper or baking sheets, non-stick baking paper. This is going to be our palette pad, essentially, which is what the paint is going to sit on. The colour doesn't matter too much. It's easier if you have white. However, I had brown baking paper to hand, and it works absolutely fine. You just kind of have to understand it's going to tint your colour slightly when you're looking at it on the palette. It won't change the colour, obviously, when it goes onto the model, but it might change your perception looking at the colour. I do want to point out that I first learned about this from Darren Latham on YouTube. Now, that video is no longer available, so I really did want to create this to kind of share this piece of knowledge, because I think it's so useful. And I get asked all the time about kind of what tools I use, what I recommend. A wet palette is one of those things. So I just wanted to put this video here, basically to help educate and show and you know, that kind of thing. So I hope it's of use. Also, you should follow Darren Latham on Instagram and all his socials. I'll put a link down in the description. So I've taken my kitchen roll. It's about 3 squares thick, or 3 squares folded over on top of each other, and then I'm going to measure the width of my tub. Yours will vary unless you're using exactly the same tub as I am. It's about half the width of the kitchen roll, which means I could cut it in half, or I could fold it over again, so I've got a stack of 6. The thicker and more stacks you've got of your kitchen roll, the more water it's going to be able to hold, the longer it'll go before you have to rehydrate the palette. So I'm going to go for 6, and then I'm just going to measure the length to see, you know, how much is going to fit into the tub. Once I've got the rough kind of idea, I'm just going to take my scissors and cut the kitchen roll to the desired length. And then we can just see it fits really nice and snug there into the bottom of the tub. And it doesn't matter if it comes up slightly over the edges, because essentially you want as much of this sponge in there. You don't want water just sitting onto the flat of the plastic, because it's going to eventually evaporate. You want it to sit into the kitchen roll. The next step now then is to hydrate this. So I've just got some plain, a lot of people swear by using distilled water or using some kind of purified, de-electrolyzed water. I just use tap water and it works fine. But yes, essentially you want to saturate the kitchen roll so that there's water, you can see water's pooling in the corners. I'm just tapping here because essentially any air bubble that gets trapped underneath, we want to push to the edges so that this sits firmly flat against the plastic. Let's not forget to try and pop that copper penny in. And we'll see if that actually helps. I've just tucked it into that top corner because I think it'll be out of the way. Once you're happy that the kitchen roll is fully hydrated and that it is pressed firmly against the plastic, the final step is to add your actual palette to the kitchen roll, because obviously if we put paint onto this now, it's just going to dissolve away and you won't be able to use it at all. So, as you did with the kitchen roll, measure up the palette to the shape, your palette paper to the shape and size of your tub. The only difference is this wants to be slightly smaller so that you have a little bit of room at the edges. As you can see, mine doesn't fully go all the way up. Once you've cut it to your desired size, place it gently into the tub and kind of, as we did with the kitchen roll, push any air pockets and bubbles out to the corners. What may happen is, if you have overhydrated slightly like I have, is that water will pool up and sit on top of the palette paper. All that means you need to do is press it as firmly as you can, pour away the excess back into your cup, and then test again. As you can see, there's still water pooling out. This means it's too wet. It will settle over time as water naturally evaporates, and you'll find that kind of happy medium. The more you make this as well, you'll get a better feel, just like you do with thinning paints, of how much water is required. Last step, I'm just soaking up any excess water that's sitting on the surface, because that's obviously going to hydrate our paint too much and thin it too much and wreck it. So before I close out, I wanted to cover a few key things about maintenance of your wet palette. Essentially, your sponge will dry out over time as water evaporates. Basically, you just want to keep adding water, you want to lift your palette paper up, add the water back in, and put the palette paper back down, just like you did when we were building this. Also, when you've exhausted all the space on your palette paper, you simply just want to lift it out, cut out a new piece, and replace it. The very final thing to note is mold will eventually grow on the kitchen roll, the sponge layer that we've created. You want to replace the kitchen roll when that happens. Well, there you have it. Your very own homemade wet palette in probably under 7 minutes, I think. Having a wet palette is honestly, it was one of the biggest changes I noticed with my painting. It really was such a step up. It seems like such a simple thing, but I promise you, if you give it a try at home, make your own, you will see the difference immediately. If you liked this video, if you could please hit like, that would really help the channel grow. And also, if you do want to see more stuff like this, hit subscribe, because I will be creating a bunch of other content as well. If there is something specific that you would like to see, either just as me as a hobbyist, or in my professional role as a studio miniatures painter, please leave a comment down below, and I will do my best. I'll endeavour to make sure I can make a video of it for you. So yes, thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video.